Good evening, everybody, and welcome to tonight's meeting of Warrington Borough Council's Cabinet on Monday, the 12th of October 2020. For tonight's meeting, we've got full Cabinet attendance, and that's myself, Councillor Bowden, also Councillors Guthrie, Higgins, Knowles, McLaughlin, Mitchell, Mundry, Patel and Smith. And from our officers, we've got the Chief Executive, Stephen Broomhead. We're also joined by Matthew Cumberbatch, Linton Green, Gareth Hopkins, David Boyer, Kath Jones, Tara Raj and Stuart Brown. I can confirm that for tonight's meeting, the agenda has been issued. All members have copies of that agenda in front of them and any updates which are needed for tonight's business. Part one of our meeting tonight is going to be publicly broadcast. And then items in part two, which are confidential, will be heard in private. They won't be open to the public and the press. And when that part of the meeting is reached tonight, then the broadcast will cease. In terms of the agenda, our first item is Code of Conduct and Declarations of Interest. And this is where a member discloses an interest and which they are required to leave the meeting. In terms of tonight, we've got three separate declarations. So I'll hand over to the Solicitor of the Council, Matthew Cumberbatch, to take that item. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Can we start with any declarations of interest from councillors on Cabinet, please?
Shall I start, Matt?
Yes. Thank you.
Yeah, I have an interest to declare for item 4. I'm a trustee for Warrington Disability Partnership. I've had no involvement in the consultation process for this item. However, to avoid any doubt that my decision making could be compromised, I will be leaving the meeting for this item.
Thank you, that's noted. And Councillor Guthrie? Can
I declare an interest in item 7 in relation to the Livewire contribution? I've not taken part in any discussions around this, but my husband is vice chair of this organisation.
Thank you, Councillor Guthrie. And so it's noted with both those declarations, those councillors will be leaving the meeting for those particular items. And we have a further declaration from the Chief Executive.
So make a declaration, colleagues, around item 9, Together Energy, and also item 13, as I'm a non-executive director of Together Energy. Thank you.
Thank you. Those conclude the declarations of interest. And back to you, Chair. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that, and thank you to colleagues for making those. Moving back to the agenda then, item 2, minutes of the last meeting. Are we happy to take those as a true record of the meeting?
Agree those, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Have we got a seconder for that? Okay, Councillor McLaughlin. Thank you. I saw you indicate physically, so that's okay. Item 3 then, Cabinet Decisions Forward Plan. Obviously we've got the version which is in your agenda pack, and we do have some updates which have been circulated to all members. A deferral of a solar investment paper from November to January, a further change in terms of Times Square development, where the contents of a report plan for November will be included in the next capital monitoring report. And then we've also scheduled into the forward plan further updates on the COVID-19 procurement arrangements, which will become a standing item in the current situation with regard to COVID-19. Is everyone happy with those? Moving on to item 4 then, first report of tonight, changes to financial assessment process and policy for calculating client contributions for adult social care. Councillor Knowles, please.
Thank you, Chair. Just to preface this report by saying that it's not a report that I think any of us would have particularly wanted to see coming to Cabinet, but nonetheless, I think the circumstances that surround this report being brought to Cabinet are pressing, because the Council operates under extreme financial pressure and is likely to for the foreseeable future. And in that context, things that we may well have really preferred not to have to consider now have to be on the table. So I personally find it regrettable that we have to bring this report, but I think we've also got to be honest and clear-eyed enough that we acknowledge that where we've got discretionary matters like this, we need to consider them, because we must make sure that we continue to be able to provide the statutory services that vulnerable people rely on. So the legal framework for charging for adult social care, the financial assessment, is all subject to the Care Act, and the Care Act requires local authorities to have a charging policy which is for all the care and support that's delivered in a non-residential setting, so people out in the community. It's a publicly published document, and it was last refreshed and updated in 2019. So it's continually under review for any minor changes that come forward. The council's charging policies take into account individuals' ability to contribute towards the cost of their services, and a full financial assessment is done for any individual who does access services, and that includes their disability related benefits and expenditure. And that's done for every service user who receives non-residential care from the local authority. That could be home care or daycare or supported living services. The assessment of the charges is combined with a service which provides a welfare benefit check to make sure that people are getting all the benefits that they're entitled to. And that's really important, to make sure that people are accessing everything that they're entitled to, because that's their right to have that money as part of their income. It's also really important because it makes sure that the local authority isn't ending up paying for things that where the individual's income could support the services that they get. So the guidance in the Care Act uses disregards and allowances to ensure that individuals retain sufficient income to pay for the things that they need. There's a minimum income guarantee, and that is dependent on their age, who the person lives with, if they're single, if they're living in a family unit, those sort of things. And currently the sort of minimum threshold is £189 per week. So the purpose of that minimum guarantee is to make sure that the person's got enough to be able to live independently and to mitigate social exclusion, to make sure that they can meet their basic needs, food, utilities, all the things that everybody needs to be able to live. And that must be after any housing costs such as rent or council tax, or any benefits provided to support those costs, and any disability related expenditure. And what has happened until now is that in order to ease the financial impact on individuals who are vulnerable individuals, the council has adopted a policy of disregarding some of the disability allowances that people are entitled to, and it doesn't include some higher level benefit amounts in the calculation of the individual's income. Now, the Care Act does make provision for the council to include all of the relevant benefits, but it's been our practice for the last 5 years not to leave some of those out. Now, certainly a number of local authorities over this last 5 years have already removed this discretionary income disregard, and they're really councils across the country and of all political persuasions. Some examples would be West Berkshire, Yorkshire, Camden, Windsor and Maidenhead, the East Riding, the Isle of Wight, Nottinghamshire. So councils right across the spectrum, and certainly councils that probably have a much better council tax base and are in more prosperous areas than Warrington. So that's important to bear in mind. But what we really have to think about is that resources need to be deployed to maintain quality essential frontline services, and the current approach only includes the full amount of attendance allowance, disability living allowance or personal independence payment, where the care is being provided overnight, and therefore in the other cases the calculation disregards the £29.45 a week that the higher level benefits are included in the current assessments. So if you're in receipt of PIP, even if you don't have the night care, you still can be assessed if you have sufficient level of need as being eligible for that night care payment. And the appendix 2 explains how that works. In Warrington, there are 773 people who receive this higher rate component, and 379 of those do receive the 24-hour support, so they are receiving the night care. They're mostly in supported accommodation, and they won't be affected by the proposal in this paper. But of the others, there are 394 individuals who do receive this disregard currently. There are some worked examples. There are some really useful appendices to this report, and the worked example in Appendix 1 just illustrates how that works with regard to the full £29.45 extra that the person in case 1 receives, as against somebody who might have a smaller package of care and only might be impacted by a partial increase up to the new maximum assessed charge. So this increase is potentially very significant, because it would have, £29.45 impact per week in the sort of maximum case, and therefore there's been a consultation done. Now, the first level of consultation didn't receive an awful lot of response, so because it's a significant issue, there was this sort of second tranche of consultation that went out, which did receive more responses, and again the feedback is included in the appendices there. So I think this has to be viewed, as I said in my sort of prefatory comments, really, that there's a national shortfall in funding for adult social care. There's new demand and there's inflationary pressure as well, and we do have to be focused on protecting frontline services. And with that in mind, the potential financial benefit to other people using Warrington's adult social care services is in the region of £570,000 per annum, so it's not an insubstantial figure. It's estimated that of the 394 individuals currently receiving the benefit, 353 would be in receipt of the services and would therefore have to pay the extra amount for their care. The remaining few would pay a smaller increased amount. In terms of the equality and diversity impact, clearly this is a vulnerable group of people that is being impacted here, and that's why there's been that extra level of consultation. It's really important that we bear in mind that they do get a full assessment to make sure that they're maximising their income and their benefits. It's also important to make sure that people are not disadvantaged as a result of the costs relating to their care needs. It's very clear that people who have difficulty in paying their contribution will have an option to make arrangements to pay, and that there's an appeals process, and that those appeals would be dealt with in a speedy fashion to not leave people hanging in limbo over it. In addition, the consideration needs to be given to how the impact could be reduced, and this was a question that was carefully considered during the consultation. It's clear that if a change is made, I think phasing is something that was very important to mitigate the impact for the people who are most affected. So without going into too many details of the consultation, because it's all set out before you, Warrington Speak were involved, again, to make sure that people who are vulnerable had somebody to advocate on their behalf. There was the reminder letter, and I think, you know, that the officers have to really be commended for the effort that they have taken to ensure that there's been an effective consultation. A lot of thought has been given to mitigating the impact, and therefore the proposal would be that there's a well-planned and phased approach to the changes to support people with the impact and make sure that they do get the right advice and that they've got time to sort of adjust to the new situation. I think part of the overall context of this really is that there is need for massive reform in adult social care, and this isn't going to fix the funding situation, but it will mitigate some of the costs in Warrington that are discretionary rather than statutory. The principle there is that we have to maintain the quality of services, and there aren't any alternative options. We've run out of road really with alternatives to doing this. It's no longer affordable. So the proposal that I would invite you to consider is to approve the recommendation to change the policy and practice in relation to higher rate benefits, £29.45 a week, and to include them as income, to improve the recommendation that the new policy is implemented from the 9th of November, but that is subject to the important proviso that it's being phased for existing service users, with 50% adjustment from this date and the remaining 50% from next April 2021. But for new service users and assessments, anybody who is about to be assessed, the full adjustment would be made from this November. And to note that Cabinet notes that arrangements will be put in place to support people with the impact of the changes, ensure that they receive proper and full advice and guidance, and to ensure that there is a timely processing of appeals of anybody who does find themselves in a particular predicament due to their disability related costs, so that they can be considered. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that, Councillor Knowles. And as you said, very much a last resort option for the council in terms of dealing with service users in our adult social care sector. And I think it's inevitable that eventually our decisions and past practice and precedent in terms of not applying full disregards, etc., it was going to catch up with us. And as austerity continues, it's inevitable that we have to look for options to save money. And as you said quite rightly, in this case, saving that money actually has a benefit for other users across the whole of the adult social care services. And so, it's important and equitable in that sense. In terms of comments and questions, then what I'll do, I'll take members in alphabetical order, and if you just want to indicate if you've got a question or not. So I'll start then with Councillor Guthrie.
No question at this time.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Higgins.
No question, thank you.
Councillor Mitchell.
No, thank you.
Okay, Councillor Mundry.
No questions at this time, thank you.
Councillor Patel.
I've got a comment, if I may.
Of course, yes, please.
I mean, you can sense the disappointment from Councillor Knowles' words and voice about this is not a report that we want to bring, and this is not something that we want to really do. There has been a problem with funding of social care in this country for a number of years, and David Cameron had a review in 2010, I think it was called the Dilnot Review, where they highlighted again that there was a funding problem for social care. Subsequent Prime Ministers did the same review. The same thing was found. There is a problem in social care. Last year, the House of Lords published a report. They called it Social Care Funding, Time to End a National Scandal. So this is not a problem of Warrington's making. This is a problem caused by central government not getting to grips with this issue of having adequate social care funding for people, and just looking at the amount of money that was stripped out of social care budgets in the first 5 years between 2010 and 2015, it's like £5 billion was stripped out of social care budgets up and down the country, and that's care for the most vulnerable people in society. So whilst it's not something that we want to do, and we've tried to avoid taking this step for a long time, I'm just wondering, how long do we have to wait for government to solve this problem? Because according to various bodies, the King's Trust and all these other people, the social care scandal is only going to continue to get worse and worse and worse. And what do we do? Because at the moment, the bulk of our funding goes on care and those type of statutory services. So that was my real observation about the predicament we are in as an administration, trying to protect the most vulnerable in Warrington, which was one of our pledges, when we're having our hands tied behind our back by central government's complete and total incompetence at looking at this issue.
No, thank you for those observations, Councillor Patel. I don't know whether Councillor Knowles wants to reply to those.
Yes, I absolutely agree with your comments, and as well as disappointment in my voice, I think perhaps you can hear frustration as well, because whichever way you turn, ADAS, the Association of Directors of Adult Social Care, the King's Fund, you're right, every organisation is saying the same thing. We need to have an honest conversation about this, and if we're to uphold the values that we have set out as a council, then we need to have adequate funding to be able to do what we set out to do properly, and the people who need to have the benefit of the services deserve to have decent services, and I don't think there's any one of us who disagrees with that. And this is sort of 2/3 of the council's budget. It's a massive amount of the work that the council does, but we've no green paper. We're in a policy vacuum, and we're chronically underfunded. And I think as a society and as a government, we kind of need to grow up and grasp the nettle with this. So yes, disappointment and frustration, but we have to be honest about it, and we have to use whichever methods that are available to us to make sure that we do preserve those statutory services. So yes, it feels like scraping the bottom of the barrel, but it's a barrel that has to be scraped. So I think you're absolutely right.
Thank you for that. Come down to Councillor Smith. Any question from you?
Yeah, I'd make a comment as well if I can.
Absolutely.
So similar idea really, but just putting some numbers there. The total council budget for this year is around 139 million. As Councillor Knowles said, about 2/3 of that is spent on essential services for vulnerable people, supporting vulnerable children and older people. Since 2010, we've had cuts of around the same amount of money from the government. So we've had about a 50% reduction in our funding. And actually, because of some of the investments we make, the total reduction is greater than that. It's probably more like 60%. I think it's important for people to realise that that was a political choice by the Conservative government. They've forced that upon us, and frankly heartless, since 2010. They didn't have to do austerity. I think that's largely recognised now. They chose to go down that route. And much as they tell us that austerity is over, it certainly isn't, because if it was over, we'd be seeing some of that money coming back. And that 130, 140 million pounds worth of cuts we've had, we're not seeing that money coming back. And what we see with this paper today is really a result of that decision. If anybody's household income was reduced by 50, 60%, then you could obviously start off by cutting the non-essentials. But at some point, you'd have to make less palatable decisions. And that's really what we've got with this paper today. This change isn't palatable, I don't think, to any of us around the table. It has been forced upon us by the government's funding decisions. I was pleased with the consultation and the mitigation that was put in place. But I just hope everyone appreciates where this decision has come from and what's led up to it.
No, thank you for those comments as well. Totally agree. Councillor Knowles, do you want to respond to those?
I think it's all been said, and you know, there's great consensus around the table that that we're in a situation where we really have run out of easy options long since. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that. I think my observation, and it kind of picks up on the point made by Councillor Smith, really, is we've kind of kicked this can down the road for quite a while now. The success of the council's commercial investments, you know, which generate income for our revenue budget, has meant that we've avoided, you know, this day coming really for a number of years. And I think, you know, picking up on Councillor Patel's comment about the disappointment and emotion in your voice, I read some of the consultation responses, page 42, for example, and you realise the impact that it has on some of those residents and service users. And of course, you know, it's inevitable that a council providing services to vulnerable people, when it makes cuts, it's once again the most vulnerable in society that are feeling the burden of austerity. And again, you know, that's a political choice that's been made by this government. But one of the comments specifically I wanted to bring out, I think the council should publicise clearly the reason they're having to implement this policy is because of the austerity measures implemented by Conservative governments over the past 10 years. This should be made completely apparent to the general population of Warrington. And I think that's a statement that we can all absolutely get behind, that this is a last resort for this council, which has always sought to protect the most vulnerable in our society. And it's very sad for all of us, I think, that we've got to this point with this inevitable decision that we're going to have to make, tough as it is. So Councillor Knowles has moved the recommendations as set out in section 10. Do we have a seconder for this report?
I'll second it.
Okay, that was Councillor Guthrie then. With no further comments, we'll move to the vote, and I'll do that again in alphabetical order. If you can indicate whether you're for or against or abstaining in this vote. So I'll start with myself, Councillor Bowden, for. Councillor Guthrie.
For.
Councillor Higgins.
For.
Councillor Knowles.
For.
Councillor Mitchell.
For.
Councillor Mundry.
For.
Councillor Patel.
For.
And Councillor Smith.
For.
Thank you, that's unanimous. Moving on then to item 5 on tonight's agenda. This paper is Green Homes Grant, and to be presented by Councillor McLaughlin, please.
Thank you, Chair. I was just getting myself back into the meeting. So this item is the Green Homes Grant, and the item is to seek Cabinet approval for delegated authority to enter into contracts for the work to homes funded by the Green Homes Grant local authority delivery. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about what that is. Warrington has a strong history in delivering green energy improvements, and we have a track record of being bold and innovative when it comes to green energy. So when this grant was announced, we were quick to get together with our partners in Cheshire East and Cheshire West and Cheshire to make sure that we could secure some of this funding for Warrington. So it's good news for Warrington that we've been able to secure this grant. The actual funding it won't affect a lot of families, but it will affect some, and I'll talk in a little bit more detail about that. So in item 3, the Chancellor announced funding for the Green Homes Grant scheme, and it's divided into 3 areas. 1.5 billion across the country for Green Homes Grant voucher scheme, and I'll talk a little bit more about that. And then what we're really interested here is the 200 million for local authority delivery scheme, of which we've been able to secure 1.7 million across Warrington and the 2 Cheshire authorities. So in section 4, it talks about fuel poverty, and we know that people are struggling with fuel poverty, and it can really affect their incomes. And based on the annual fuel poverty statistics published in April, Warrington has 8,110 households currently in fuel poverty, and this equates to 9.1% of the population of households. In the past, Warrington has a strong track record in promoting government initiatives to improve energy efficiency, such as loft insulation, cavity wall, and so on. We've installed solar PV panels in social housing to reduce fuel poverty, and this was a really excellent scheme that attracted a lot of recognition. And unfortunately, that had to come to an end when the government changed the rules on funding for solar panel buyback schemes, but at the time it was a win-win for everybody. So the 3 schemes, the Green Homes Grant Voucher Scheme, this is a private scheme for householders and landlords. It's open to everyone, And it doesn't really affect what we're doing in the decision making. But what I will say about it is that the council will promote this to make sure as many Warrington households as possible can take advantage of this and help to reduce our carbon emissions and help to support people out of fuel poverty. But the item we're really interested in is the Green Homes Grant Local Authority Delivery Scheme, which is in item 6. Now, this scheme aims to support low-income households living in the least energy efficient homes, rated Energy Performance Certificate bands E, F and G to tackle fuel poverty. The deadline for this bid was on the 1st of September. And the money all has to be spent by the 31st of March. So it's a very quick turnaround. And as I said, because of Warrington's track record, we were able to get together with our partners and quickly put a bid together, an innovative bid that that's enabled us to secure the funding. And a lot of councils didn't secure funding or weren't able to bid in the timescale. But we now have the challenge of delivering that by March 2021. So as I say, it is a tight timescale, and the funding will only affect a small number of households. So it's a start, but it won't get anywhere near the 8,000 household I talked about earlier. We think that with these 1.7 million, we'll be able to provide improvements to 205 properties, and that's across Cheshire, the 2 Cheshires as well. So as I say, it's a small amount of funding, but it will help some households. So I'm not going to be too negative on that issue, and hopefully, you know, I know that we will be able to make a difference for those households. It mentions local energy hubs. This is the 3rd tranche of the scheme, and we don't know much about that yet. So it's mentioned, but there's no further detail on that part of the scheme. So in Warrington, if just in item 8 now, in Warrington, it's proposed that the scheme is targeted at homeowners who live in a property with energy efficiency performance certificate E, F or G. And as well as providing energy efficiency improvements, we will provide energy advice to homeowners as part of the scheme. And to maximise the level of grant funding available, we will be encouraging private landlords to apply for the first part of the scheme that I mentioned earlier, which is the private part of the scheme. The council will have to procure the services to undertake property inspections, and this is why this has come to Cabinet today. So we are not in a position where we could do all this with a full OJEU compliant tender process. It wouldn't be possible to carry it out within that 6-month time frame that I talked about earlier. So it's proposed that the council uses the Crown Commercial Services, Heat Networks and Electricity Generation Assets Dynamic Purchasing System to conduct a tender process to meet the council's requirements. And it tells you a little bit more about that procurement process in section 9. In the tender, the council would wish to support local businesses and particularly to support the construction in response to the COVID-19 outbreak. It would ensure that we maximise the opportunities for local spend and maximise the opportunities for securing jobs for local people. So the financial considerations in item 10, no match funding is required for the scheme. The successful bids will be paid in 2 instalments, with the first an upfront 50% and 50% paid within 10 days following submission of the 3rd monthly report. The legal implications are in item 11. And just briefly, if I touch on the risk assessment, it's a very low risk project. The main risks identified are that this scheme might compete with the grant voucher scheme, the first part of the scheme I talked about, and this might mean less people apply. Or that insufficient contractors are available to carry out the works. And to mitigate this approach, our approach would be to target potential properties that are likely to meet the eligibility criteria and procure using the Crown Commercial Dynamic Purchasing System. If the three authorities were unable to spend the full amount of the grant, that would have to be returned to the government. So reasons for recommendation: due to the short window for this scheme, a delegation of authority is required to maximise the window available to carry out the works, and you have the recommendations in item 16 to allow us to do that. That's it, Chair.
Okay, thank you for that thorough presentation there, Councillor McLaughlin. I'll come through members in order again, if they indicate they've got any questions. So I'll start with Councillor Guthrie, please.
Yes, just a short comment. I mean, I think Maureen's covered what I was going to say during her thing in the report. But I just wanted to say this council's always had a green approach to energy and energy efficiency. I mean, Maureen talked about the solar panels we installed in 2011, and we installed 2,168, and we didn't charge anything for the energy that they produced for residents whose roofs they were on. And we are all striving for a greener future, and I hope that our residents can use this grant to help their homes become more energy efficient, and that will help improve their homes and hopefully have a better future. The only thing I'm concerned about within this is the tight timescales that the government have introduced within this figure. I mean, it's, you know, if it's not spent, it has to be returned to the government. So, you know, that's not good from our point of view. Thank you.
Okay, do you need to come back on any of that, Councillor McLaughlin? Yeah. Are you happy with that comment?
No, I'm happy with that. I think we're agreeing with each other there, Chair.
Okay, good. I'll come to Councillor Higgins then.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, just a statement of support, really. Well, firstly, I welcome this report, and I also agree with Councillor McLaughlin that this report or the work doesn't go as far or as deep as we would wish it to. Now, what I am concerned about is we're coming into autumn or in autumn and winter, so we've got another 4 or 5 months of cold nights, dark nights. Now, we want to get people out of fuel poverty. With people working from home, being at home, losing jobs, staying at home, possibly more shielded groups having to stay in for longer, people not being able to go out. So people will be using gas, electric, etc. They will find themselves deeper in fuel poverty, and that will in turn have effects on their health, mental well-being, and financial predicament. So yes, it's good, this report, and I welcome it, but as I say, I agree with Councillor McLaughlin, it doesn't go far enough and deep enough. And I also think the time limitation really is a constraint, and in some ways it should be open-ended. There should be no time delay on it. It should be open-ended, and it gives everybody that opportunity to make a bid to it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that. I don't know if Councillor McLaughlin feels the need to comment back.
Yeah, no, it's a very good point from Councillor Higgins. I think we're all painfully aware of the financial circumstances many of our residents are facing at the moment. It is going to be a hard winter for many people that may have job insecurity. And as Councillor Higgins said, if you're in the home more, that's more heating, more lighting and electricity that you're going to need over that time. So yes, as I said earlier, this and as Councillor Higgins said, this is a drop in the ocean in the amount of houses we need to improve. But it is a start, and it will make a difference for those households, and we'll continue to look. I know Councillor Guthrie will be is very proactive in continually looking in her portfolio to how we can improve residents' access to cleaner, greener and cheaper energy.
Okay, thank you. Come to Councillor Knowles then, please.
No, thank you.
Okay, Councillor Mitchell.
No, thank you.
Councillor Mundry.
Am I on? No comment.
Okay, sound like you've just been caught up by the news of the world there. Councillor Patel.
Can I make an observation, please, Chair?
Of course.
Thank you. I'm fully supportive of the report and the recommendations. And I think this is something that, you know, sometimes people wonder, what do local authorities do? And if it wasn't for this type of activity, this type of initiative, I think so many houses would miss out on this type of support to make their homes more efficient and more greener. Because when you look at the actual way the money's spent, 1.5 billion is going for the voucher scheme and 200 million is being allocated to local authorities. But when you look at the detail of the 1.5 billion, I just think that's not accessible to the vast majority of people in Warrington. When you go on the government's own website, there are very few actual registered traders who can do the work under this scheme, who actually operate in Warrington. A lot of them are in Liverpool or in Manchester and further afield, and persuading them to come to Warrington to give a quote and the like is going to be a bit of a mission. And I think the other thing as well is that the way the scheme is set up, people have to pay up front for the primary piece of work, whether it's installation or changing their heating system, before they can apply for the grant for the secondary work. And for a lot of households in the current economic climate, putting that money up front is just totally, it makes the scheme inaccessible, especially if by the time they do the work, there's no money left because it's all been allocated. So, you know, I just wanted to make the point that, you know, it's another great headline grabbing announcement from the government, but ultimately I think it's the £200 million that local authorities will be delivering that will work, and I'd be very surprised if Warrington residents can actually tap into the 1.5 billion. So I'm glad the council is showing this initiative.
Councillor McLaughlin, do you want to respond?
Yeah, thank you. That is a very good point from Councillor Patel, and I think it's important to understand that there are these two schemes. So Councillor Patel's really commenting on the first part of the scheme, which that anyone can apply for. But as you say, there are issues with that. Who's going to do the work? There's issues with how many people can apply, and as you say, they do have to fund some of it themselves, and at the moment that is a problem for people. So it is a good point, but it's not to play down what we can do as a local authority in the second part of the scheme. As I keep saying, it's not going to be a ton of households getting these improvements. It will be a small amount of houses, but we have secured it, and we will always go out and look for those initiatives to be able to secure that sort of improvement. And hopefully we will be able to spend all the money to maximise that. But again, timescales will be against us, so we're going to have to move very fast.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Smith?
No comment from me, thank you.
Okay, thank you. I think in terms of in my own observations, you can see why government always talks in big numbers. So when I look at section 3 in the report, you know, £2 billion sounds like, you know, an incredible amount of money, until you sort of drill it down and see how much of that is available locally. And I think there's two things that really strike me about the report. And the first is in 4.3, our estimate that there's over 8,000 households in fuel poverty here in Warrington. And whilst that, you know, compares favourably with the Northwest average, it's still 8,000 households which you know, face difficulties in terms of meeting their fuel bills. And then when I look at Appendix 1 in terms of the number of properties with solid walls, you know, the best part of 7,000 homes there. So when you realise that actually the grant scheme is only going to affect 205 properties across Cheshire and Warrington, then it really is just a drop in the ocean. I think we're right to really push the Green Homes Grant Voucher Scheme. That's something we absolutely need to do for the benefit of our residents. And my one encouragement from that really is that for those people on low incomes or that are in receipt of income-based or disability benefits, that they are going to be eligible for claiming 100% of the cost of those improvements, so up to a maximum of £10,000. So for those who are, you know, perhaps most at need in terms of their financial situation, there is obviously some hope that they can get vital fuel improvement work done at no cost to themselves. So In terms of the vouchers, obviously people need to apply, they need to make a choice for themselves in terms of their own resources and whether they can fund some of that work themselves. But I think we're absolutely right to advertise this and encourage our residents to apply. In terms of the proposal overall, obviously you talked about Warrington private landlords and encouraging them, and I think that's absolutely right as well. Just because you don't own the property doesn't mean that you don't suffer in relation to fuel poverty. And again, I think that's another important thing for us to be advising as a council. But you know, an excellent report, and obviously I look forward to delivering genuine benefit for the people of Warrington, even if it is over the next 6 months, which is obviously incredibly tight. Do we have a seconder for this report?
I'm happy to second.
Okay, that's Councillor Mitchell. Okay, then if we move to the vote in the same way as last time. So Councillor Bowden, 4. Councillor Guthrie.
4.
Councillor Higgins.
4.
Councillor Knowles.
4.
Councillor McLaughlin.
4.
Councillor Mitchell.
4.
Councillor Mundry.
4.
Councillor Patel.
4.
And Councillor Smith.
4.
Okay, thank you, colleagues. That's unanimous as well. Moving on to item 6 then. This is a report from myself regarding progress with the town deal bid. Members will be already aware of the potential for £25 million worth of grant funding from government, which the town can bid for as part of the town funds scheme. And really the intention was to identify transformational projects for Warrington as part of that initiative from government. It was officially launched about a year ago, and what the government was really looking to do was to unleash economic potential in 100 towns across the country. And the focus really was around economic growth, regeneration, transport, connectivity, skills and culture. Each town had to set up its own town deal strategy board, and obviously the intent there was to bring in partners from across the town to help the council develop its proposals for a bid under the town's fund scheme. We went through a process of identifying potential board members, a very strong emphasis from government in terms of local business leaders, for example, but we also wanted to include partners through, for example, Culture Warrington, our business improvement district in the town, but also wider involvement through Warrington & Co. The town deal board first met in January with Matt Crompton of Muse Developments as our chair. And the government was very specific in terms of its guidance, directing that the chair had to be selected from the private sector. And the board was established essentially to advise the council on developing its own town investment plan. And to be clear, it wasn't a decision-making body in itself. Authority and accountability for that town investment plan lies solely with the council. There was some funding provided at the beginning of the process. Around £173,000 was made available in order to develop that town investment plan, and that was used in part to commission Atkins to advise the council on transformational projects. It was a Birchwood-based company who were quite familiar with Warrington's local economy, and Atkins' role was really to facilitate some of the thematic groups, to develop out those potential projects and to help us write that town investment plan. Throughout the process, we've had very positive engagement with partners, particularly those from the business sector. And I think that's testament and evidenced in the way that the bid document was brought together, but also the wider involvement of people throughout the community to kind of build on the ideas that the council already had. And I think the fact that the time frame for bids was quite truncated, we actually put our bid document in by the end of July, the first deadline of 3 different tranches. And you know, it really built upon work that the council already had in train in lots of ways. What the government is, you know, keen to do is they often talk about oven ready or shovel ready projects, and the fact that we're able to put together such a strong bid document and to bid for the full, you know, potential £25 million allocation was really down to the fact that the council had got a number of potential projects already in place. And a great example of that is obviously around the new bus depot and the proposal for electrification of our bus fleet here in Warrington. That wasn't just something that we plucked out of the air over the last few months. That's something which we've been keen to develop through our green energy initiatives, and obviously as part of our, you know, wider regeneration and local transport plan. In terms of other factors, we recognise obviously the impact of COVID-19, which came along partway through this process, and I think it's probably fair to say that some of those projects and our ideas were affected by the COVID-19 crisis, and perhaps things which were seen to have a relatively lower priority at the start of the year came up the pecking order. And we've recognised that with one of the schemes in particular, one of the themes we have, which has been around health and social care. And when you see the final 7 thematic groups, you'll see that there's a strong element there in terms of the social fabric of Warrington, and obviously trying to improve the health and social care situation here in the town. The final submission is described in section 5, and the particular challenges which are listed in section 5.2 really talk about the reality of what it's like living and working here in Warrington, and really, you know, drew out some of the issues regarding historic town centre investment, you know, particularly around, for example, Upper Bridge Street, Sankey Street, Ryland Street, the things that we all see every day, you know, and hopefully which are going to have you know, a kickstart on the back of the council's own investment in Times Square. But there's some very, you know, clear social themes there as well regarding health deprivation, issues such as housing shortages for targeted groups, the impact of having an ageing population, but also just generally our environment in terms of air quality and transport. So the 7 thematic groups are listed in 5.3, and those have been followed through in terms of developing 7 shortlisted projects, which are listed in the table in section 5.5. And as you can see, we've got a total ask there of some £26.56 million. That obviously exceeds the notional £25 million, and we're obviously hopeful that we'll get full, if not partial, funding support for all of those schemes, because we believe that they're strong schemes that are absolutely the right things to be doing here in Warrington. The report itself recognises the need for speeding up delivery, and one of the items in section 6.1 talks about an accelerated fund to speed up the delivery of projects that are being put forward here. And to be clear, that's money which is not additional to the Towns Fund award. It's part of the overall scheme. And since the report was issued for Cabinet, we've now received £1 million of accelerated funding from central government. So that is being used now to support our all-electric bus fleet, including the relocation of the existing bus depot. And as an example of what I was saying around the council already having a lot of schemes in place, this accelerated funding, in addition to money applied for through the Towns Fund, but also money that has been secured, for example, through the local enterprise partnership, means that we're, aggregating a significant fund now in order to take this project forward. And it's a very exciting project for us as a town in terms of making a real difference with the green bus fleet and for one of the last few remaining municipal bus companies in the country. And I think that's really important. So in terms of next steps, obviously the bid has been submitted. We obviously await response from MHCLG regarding our town investment plan and the projects we've put forward. And hopefully we're going to be successful across the piece with those different projects. And when that decision comes forward, we'll then begin the process of delivering those schemes in line with what you see in section 7. In terms of financial considerations, I've obviously already mentioned that the MHCLG provided around 173,000 up front, and we've obviously used that in Commission Atkins to do the work. We've now received money through, or secured money through the Getting Building Fund from the LEP and the money from the Accelerated Fund that I've already said. So now it's just a question of waiting for that central government decision on those 7 projects. I think it's very much in keeping with our ambition to grow a strong economy for all. We talk about Warrington means business. We've recognised the importance of our town centre, and this town investment plan is a key driver really for delivering some really important schemes in Warrington, which will target some of our disadvantaged residents and some of our struggling wards, particularly in the inner ward areas. It has taken a significant amount of work to get to this stage. I'm grateful to our partners on the Town Deals Board. There's been a lot of useful input from partners across the town, particularly the business sector, and I want to thank them all for what they've done to help the council put this this bid document together and get it to government as part of that first tranche. And I'm sure we'll see the success of that work in the coming weeks and months. So I'll move to the recommendation in 13, which is for Cabinet to support the delivery of this town investment plan in order to realise significant economic development benefits, including jobs and investment. So I'll come, I think, to Councillor Guthrie for any comments or questions.
None at this time, thank you.
Okay, Councillor Higgins.
Thank you, Ross. Well, firstly, I welcome this report and pay particular attention to the work of the Central 6 Master Plan. That's proved a useful vehicle more than once when it comes to providing valuable evidence that underpins such bids. Now, I must remind colleagues that this may look like new money, but alas, it's money that has previously been denied this council, but more importantly, our residents under the guise of austerity measures, or in plain English, Tory cuts. So let's not be fooled into thinking that this is new money. It is not new money.
Okay, thank you for that. Councillor Knowles.
I think at risk of sort of saying something very, very obvious, it's so important to have plans in the pipeline. It's so important to have some aspirations and some ambitions for Warrington, because without that ability to look forward and have a vision of how things could be, you're not ready with your oven ready, shovel ready projects when an opportunity comes ahead. And so I think it's a real example of that ambition, that it was possible to pull this together and also to get the bid in for the first tranche of the funding. And I'm very, very supportive of it. It also strikes me that there's sort of more interconnectedness of things in the actual project than might at first appear. Health and Social Care Academy, it's all about skills. It's about making people more economically resilient by giving them access to the training that gets people decent jobs. And it's also about providing the services that people will give because they have those decent jobs. It's the same with construction. We all talk about the digital gap. How, let's address our own digital gap with our own enterprise hub that's coming up with some of those solutions. I think it's really, really important that we think about this in terms of its capacity to improve the quality of life for people in the town and using the services in the town. And I think, you know, we could have become very, very deterred and clapped out by the financial impact of austerity on the council, but we've not lost our mojo and our appetite for trying to make things better and do things differently. So that's exciting. I just really hope that it comes off and that we get to see these fantastic projects coming to life.
Thank you for that really positive contribution. Councillor McLaughlin.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Just very briefly, I know Councillor Higgins and Councillor Knowles have pretty much said what I wanted to say, but you asked, you said in the last item, item 4, what do local authorities do? You know, this is another testament to all the hard work that goes in to get those projects together. Certainly an incredible amount of work went in during the bid process, but that was only able to happen because of the incredible amount of work that went in prior to that over the last few years. And I've been involved in some of those projects, the Central 6 Master Plan that Councillor Higgins talked about, and the culture strategy. So when we went to those meetings, and I was involved in 3 of the 4 tranches because of my wide spreading portfolio, it was clear to me in those meetings that when Atkins was saying, well, what do we want here, what do we want there, we need the evidence for this, or we need some background information. We had it already, and that's why we've been able to go in early and put that bid in early to secure these projects. And I hope, as Councillor Noel said, to see this vision realised, because actually as a local authority we've done an incredible amount of work, and we do have a bold, ambitious vision for this town and what this town could look like.
Thanks again for some more really positive comments in endorsing this approach, and I thought it was all down to one person. Councillor Mitchell, any questions?
No, thank you.
Councillor Mundry.
Yes, I thank you, sir. I welcome the proposals coming forward. Obviously, looking at the active travel programme, the electric bus fleet, I'm very particularly pleased to see them in there. But I'm impressed with the overall scheme.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Patel.
No comment, thank you.
Councillor Smith.
Nothing to add, thank you.
I think I always feel sorry for you, Councillor Smith. I might reverse the order next time, because probably everyone said everything before I come to you. Okay, I've moved the recommendations in section 13. Have I got a seconder for this report?
I will second.
That's Councillor McLaughlin, thank you. Okay, if we move to the vote, Councillor Bowden, 4. Councillor Guthrie.
4.
Councillor Higgins.
4.
Councillor Knowles.
4.
Councillor McLaughlin.
4.
Councillor Mitchell.
4.
Councillor Mundry.
4.
Councillor Patel.
4.
And Councillor Smith.
4.
Okay, thanks colleagues, that's unanimous. Moving on then to agenda item 7, COVID-19 procurement arrangements. Councillor Mitchell, please.
Thank you, Chair. When the pandemic broke out, the government relaxed the rules on procurement, for example, relaxing the need to tender for goods and services. This is just a report to bring to Cabinet's attention to update on how those devolved powers have been used over the past month. And there's 3 actions to report this time. The first one relates to grants to care homes. The council's invested £772,735 since March, and that's a combination of supporting the additional costs caused by the pandemic, such as extra staff costs and PPE, and also addressing reduced income for homes with occupancy levels that are less than 80%. There are currently 8 homes in this category. In these homes, about a third are placements which the council pays for. That's about 164 people, and 323 places which the council supports in partnership with other agencies or local authorities. The most important reason to keep these homes going is because of the distress and anxiety of residents who could have had to move home, especially people with dementia or physical health problems. There is also provision for further grants of just over 200k for homes with occupancy of less than 80% to keep them going moving forward. The next one relates to daycare provision. There were original plans to move to a dynamic purchasing system by October, so about now. A dynamic purchasing system is a completely electronic system used by a contracting authority such as a council to buy commonly used goods, works or services. Unlike a traditional way of doing this, suppliers can apply to join at any time. It's more open for small and medium businesses to get involved, and it can make the award of tenders quicker. However, because of COVID, that hasn't happened. It's now been put back until April next year. But the current contract that we have with Catalyst Choices expired on the 30th of September, so just gone. The contract doesn't contain any provision to extend. Therefore, a further contract has been awarded to Catalyst, which would in ordinary times have a value of £840,000. However, the actual amount will be less than that because at the moment, people can't really use day centres because of the restrictions that we're under. The final one relates to Livewire. Obviously, because of COVID, they've had to close leisure facilities and therefore haven't had the income from that, which would usually make up about 70% of their annual turnover. The council has stepped in to provide support in the short term until people are able to use leisure centres again. The support has been a one-off cash contribution of £125,000 and the restructuring of the management fee paid to Livewire to help them with cash flow. It's also been agreed to defer rent on the Great Sankey Neighbourhood Hub for a period of 12 months. Chair, I'll move the recommendation at paragraph 12 and happy to answer any questions.
Okay, thank you for that presentation. I'll come to Councillor Smith first this time.
Not much to add on this one, I don't think. I noticed some of the spending that we've done, which obviously I support due to COVID, and a report in the news yesterday from the LGA saying that councils across the country expected to spend 1.7 billion over budget by March. And I'm still hoping that the government actually starts taking some action about that and funding the councils properly for the extra spending we've had through COVID. Thank you.
Okay, do you want to come back on that, Councillor Mitchell, or are you just nodding in agreement?
Happy with that, fully agree with what he said.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Patel?
No comment.
Councillor Mundry?
Yes, I think similar comments to Councillor Smith really is I think we could be asking our two MPs to lobby government to do the right thing on behalf of Warrington Borough Council, but all councils in general, but particularly our MPs. I think we should be asking them to say the government said do what it takes, no matter what. We've done our bit. It's time for them to do their bit.
Oh, hear for that, certainly. Councillor McLaughlin?
Yeah, no further comments. Thanks, Chair.
Councillor Knowles?
Just a really brief one. I think we're in such strange times, and it's about tidying certainly the bits that affect older people and social care. It's about tidying things over till we can work out how this is going to pan out in the longer run. It's about making sure it's always a delicate balance with care homes, with sort of market sufficiency and having the right kind of settings available for people. But it's been a very difficult time, and it's so important that we can come out the other side of COVID with some choices and options left for people. And it's the same with day services. They're going to be really important to people again, perhaps never more important when people can get back to them, because people are going to, people have really been starved of the opportunity to get out and about and do something different. There's a lot of pressure on carers. So keeping things going, investing in them to make sure that they don't fall over in the meantime is really important.
Yeah, agreed with that. Councillor Higgins, any comments?
No, thank you. Everything said.
Okay, well, Councillor Mitchell has moved the recommendations. Do we have a seconder for this report?
I'm happy to second.
Okay, that's Councillor Knowles seconding. If we move to the vote then, Councillor Bowden, 4. Councillor Higgins,
4.
Councillor Knowles,
4.
Councillor McLaughlin,
4.
Councillor Mitchell,
4.
Councillor Mundry,
4.
Councillor Patel,
4.
and Councillor Smith.
4.
Okay, thank you, colleagues. That's unanimous. Moving on then to agenda item 8, Councillor Mitchell again, property investment.
Thanks, Chair. This is an update on a property investment which Cabinet has already previously approved. It was approved following a process which included external legal advice from a QC, scrutiny by non-Cabinet councillors, including opposition councillors, in a risk workshop, bringing together external experts, senior council officers and councillors to fully explore the risks, further scrutiny by the Treasury Management Board, whose membership includes both Tory and Lib Dem councillors. The council's investments continue to do well, and as we heard earlier from Rebecca's report, the cuts that we often have to make often affect the most vulnerable people, whose services make up about 80% of our spending. Investments like this add over £20 million to our budget for day-to-day costs. That's after all the costs have been taken out. If critics of this council can think of a better way, I'd like to hear it. I'll move the recommendation at paragraph 11 and happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that brief presentation, Councillor Mitchell. On that basis, I don't imagine there are any comments or questions. So if anyone has got anything they wish to add, feel free to raise it now. Otherwise, have we got a seconder for this report?
I'm happy to second.
Okay, that's Councillor Knowles then. Okay, it's been moved and seconded, so we move to the vote. Councillor Bowden, 4. Councillor Guthrie?
4.
Councillor Higgins?
4.
Councillor Knowles?
4.
Councillor McLaughlin?
4.
Councillor Mitchell?
4.
Councillor Mundry?
4.
Councillor Patel?
4.
And Councillor Smith.
4.
Okay, thank you, colleagues. That's unanimous. Move on then to agenda item 9, Together Energy update. Councillor Mitchell again, please.
Thanks, Chair. So this is an update on our current investment with Together Energy. There's been 2 decisions recently taken. The first is a change of energy supplier to a different company. Ørsted is a world-leading green energy supplier who are supplying green energy to Together on better terms than the former supplier. The company has recently also purchased Bristol Energy's customer book, which was really positive. The company is growing its customer base as per the business plan, which in turn increases its value. When you look at the recent headlines about Bristol and Robin Hood for Nottingham, it really underlines the different approach that we've taken here in Warrington. Instead of the council trying to run an energy company, we've invested in an existing company run by energy professionals with many years' experience in the industry. While some of our investments are there to increase our income, some are made for other policy reasons. Together we'll provide an income in due course, but there are other important reasons for this investment. The first, 100% green energy for our town, in line with the climate emergency motion that we had. The second is to tackle fuel poverty. And the third is the replacement of expensive prepayment meters with smart meters. I'll hand over now to Russ. This is a joint report.
Thank you for that, Councillor Mitchell. My involvement in this report is really around reporting on the urgent decision that I needed to take regarding the Together Energy's purchase of the Bristol Energy Limited customer book. I'll explain that in the part 2 report, but obviously it's part of the recommendation here to note that urgent decision and the reasons for it. I'll move to members then for any comments or questions. Councillor Guthrie?
Not at this time.
Okay, Councillor Higgins?
4.
8.
Sorry, nothing, thank you, Russ. It's late.
Councillor Knowles?
Just to say that I was very pleased with the service that I've had from Together Energy since I transferred our household energy to them, and I'm even more chuffed that the supplier has been changed to Ørsted with its track record as a world-leading green energy company. I feel extremely happy that I'm the recipient of their green energy.
Jolly good. A satisfied customer. Councillor McLaughlin?
No other comments, thank you.
Councillor Mundry?
Yes, thank you. Russ, it's fully understand the reasoning behind the urgent decision making.
Okay, thank you for that. Councillor Patel?
No comment.
Councillor Smith?
No, thank you.
Okay. No, I totally agree with your comment, Councillor Knowles. And I mean, in terms of Ørsted, it is absolutely you know, one of the world's leading green energy companies, and that's part of our you know, direction quite clearly. You know, we've committed to the climate change agenda and to obviously you know, get to a carbon neutral position for the council as a whole. And I think, you know, this is absolutely in line with our strategy for Together and how it fits, you know, seamlessly with everything else we're doing within the town, whether it be in relation to transport or whether it be in relation to the energy agenda. But I think financially, you know, it's the right decision for Together Energy. It's better terms than what they had with their current supplier, you know, and it's the right thing to be doing. And to pick up on, you know, Councillor Mitchell's point, you know, Together is performing well. Its growth is a clear part of its business plan. Acquiring the customer book of Bristol Energy was absolutely part of that. And what this does is, by delivering the business plan, means that Warrington gets its return from that investment in Together Energy much sooner. I'm really pleased that you've switched to Together Energy. I think, you know, there's something that everybody in Warrington could do, is to you know, to be involved in Together Energy, to support the council's investment in that company, and obviously to get the benefits of that themselves, whether it's the knowledge that they've got a fully green tariff or whether it's because financially it works for them. But obviously, you know, we've got a 50% stake in that company, and its success will be you know, a good reflection on Warrington's investment decision, but it obviously brings a return to the people of Warrington through income that the council can use on services for them. Have we got a seconder for the report?
I'm happy to second.
Okay, Councillor McLaughlin, thank you for that. So it's been moved and seconded, so moving to the vote then. Councillor Bowden, 4. Councillor Guthrie?
4.
Councillor Higgins?
Yes, I said earlier, 4.
No, I know you did. I didn't know it was part of the meeting we're in. Councillor Knowles?
4.
Councillor McLaughlin?
4.
Councillor Mitchell?
4.
Councillor Mundry?
4.
Councillor Patel?
4.
And Councillor Smith?
4.
Okay, thank you, colleagues. That's unanimous. Agenda item 10, operation and management of community recycling centres. Councillor Guthrie.
Thank you. This report provides an overview of the current position of the authority's community recycling centres and the request to extend the current contract until September 2021, in line with the Management Procurement Service. It has come to Cabinet due to the extension on the present contract, and our residents really value our CRCs. We can see that due to the reaction when the CRCs were closed during the lockdown, and people have reacted to that by going to recycling centres, and we've seen an increase in waste actually going to those centres. mainly at Gateworth for some reason, but it has been noted in all 3 recycling centres. So it is something our residents value. Our previous procurement exercise was carried out in 2015 and in December 2018 the Exec Board approved an extension on this contract until the 31st of January 2020. The company providing the service at the moment has confirmed it would be happy to extend the present contract further until the 30th of September 2021. The company has been providing an excellent service during COVID and has helped navigate the phased opening of our CRCs, even down to traffic managing outside the CRCs because we had long queues of traffic. As I've said before, the CRCs are dealing daily with an increase of waste volumes at all 3 of our sites. Details of the extension are contained in part 2 and the recommendations for this report are contained on page 84, item 9, sorry. I'll not read them out, but if members can note those. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Guthrie. Have we got any comments or questions from members? Councillor Higgins?
No, thank you.
Councillor Knowles?
No thanks.
Councillor McLaughlin?
No, thank you.
Councillor Mitchell?
No, thank you.
Councillor Mundry?
No comments.
Councillor Patel?
No, thank you.
Councillor Smith?
No, thank you.
Okay, we've got no comments or questions. Have we got a seconder for this report?
Yes, I'll second.
Okay, Councillor Higgins has seconded it. So we move to the vote then. Councillor Bowden, 4. Councillor Guthrie?
4.
Councillor Higgins?
4.
Councillor Knowles?
4.
Councillor McLaughlin?
4.
Councillor Mitchell?
4.
Councillor Mundry?
4.
Councillor Patel?
4.
And Councillor Smith?
4.
Okay, thank you, colleagues. That's unanimous. Moving on to our final item in part 1, Warrington Northwest Region Investment. Councillor Mitchell, please.
Thanks, Chair. This is a report seeking Cabinet approval for an investment which is once again backed by property, like a mortgage. That's similar to loans we already make to registered social landlords. The value of the property we hold exceeds the borrowing we have. Anyone who's had a mortgage will have experienced owing a lot of money but having a house to show for it. The council makes these investments for a reason, because we're one of the most poorly funded councils in the country. Our investments generate more than £20 million per year once you've taken all of the costs out, including the cost of borrowing the money. I noted with interest last week the comments made by Andy Carter, Tory MP, whose government has slashed funding to local councils over the last decade, and the same government that hasn't fulfilled its promise to pay back councils for the extra costs and expenses of COVID, leaving a further £22 million funding gap. If we don't get the money back, we'll have to cut services. But what does that really mean? Well, the day-to-day net cost to run the council comes to about £140 million per year. About 80% of that spend is on support for older people and adults with special needs, and also for protecting children who are at risk of harm. That leaves about £32 million on services that people know about: leisure, parks, libraries, youth services, maintaining the roads, helping homeless people, street cleaning and lighting. So I wonder where Mr. Carter would make his £20 million cuts. Selling council assets and paying back some or all of our debts would of course give us some capital receipts, but by law we can't use capital receipts to pay for services. and we would then lose at least £20 million of annual revenue, which we use to protect services. We've already cut back the services that people know about and the cuts that they'll be aware of, and that's because of government cuts to our funding. So would Mr. Carter cut those back more? Less street cleaning, close parks, close libraries, or would he make the cuts to services for vulnerable adults and children? We make these investments to do our best to protect the people of Warrington from the government's cuts. And as we heard from Rebecca earlier on, it's sadly still not enough when you look at the massive cuts that we've had to face. So instead of carping on about what the council is having to do, perhaps Mr. Carter could really help the people that he's been elected to serve and make sure that his friends in government fund the council properly and come good on their promise to pay the costs of COVID. I won't hold my breath. So I move the recommendation at paragraph 10 of the report, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you for that, Councillor Mitchell. I'll come to colleagues for any comments or questions then. Let's start with Councillor Smith again.
I was contemplating a comment, but I wouldn't want to take away from anything that Councillor Mitchell said. Really fully support everything she said there. I thought that was an excellent presentation. Thank you. Excellent,
thank you. Councillor Patel.
Just one comment really, just a point of clarification about what something Councillor Mitchell said. She's right. The vast majority of councils are bound by law not to use capital receipts to prop up the revenue budget. But just to remind people that in November 2018, the Tory government did allow Northamptonshire Council to use £70 million worth of its capital receipts to prop up its revenue budget, completely against the laws the rest of us have to abide by.
That's a great comment there by Councillor Patel. And of course, it probably helps if you're a failing Conservative run county council to get that kind of dispensation and support from government. Clearly, those councils which work within the rules and manage to balance the books every year, and to do so despite austerity and broken promises, are not the ones who get that level of support. Councillor Mundry.
Yeah, I have no comments this time.
OK, thank you. Councillor McLaughlin.
No comments from me, thank you.
Councillor Knowles.
It's all about that all-important revenue, isn't it? But I think it sounds easy. Yes, let's generate some extra revenue because we've got those services that we must deliver and that are so important to us to deliver. But this is not done without a huge amount of careful thought, reflection, external advice, internal discussion. It's a really robust process, and so these things aren't just sort of dreamt up or happened upon. A lot of careful work goes on behind the scenes, and that is something that members of the sort of main opposition have the ability to join in with and connect with and hear that same information. So there's a lot of triangulation that goes on behind the scenes to make sure that anything that does come forward is a really robust proposal that will deliver the revenue that it is set out to deliver, and it will have the effect that it needs to have in terms of supporting the services that we do maintain. Thank you.
Do you want to respond to any of that, Councillor Mitchell?
No, thanks. I think it's all been said and I agree with what my colleagues have said. OK,
thank you. Councillor Higgins, any comments or questions?
No, I think Councillor Mitchell's delivered an excellent report and made it very clear. Thank you.
OK, Councillor Guthrie.
No comments at this time.
OK, thank you. I think that's everybody. Have we got a seconder for this report?
I'll second it.
OK, Councillor Guthrie is seconded then. Moving to the vote. Councillor Bowden, 4. Councillor Guthrie.
4.
Councillor Higgins.
4.
Councillor Knowles.
4.
Councillor McLaughlin.
4.
Councillor Mitchell.
4.
Councillor Mundry,
For.
Councillor Patel,
4.
and Councillor Smith.
4.
Okay, thank you, colleagues. That's unanimous. That's the end of our part 1 agenda for tonight. So that's the end of our public broadcast of this meeting. Thank you for watching, and I hope you found it useful and informative. Do I have a proposer to take us into part 2?
Yeah, I propose we move to part 2.
Okay, and is that seconded?
Yeah, I'll second.
Okay, all agreed?
Aye.
Agreed.
Okay,
Agreed. Yeah.
thank you very much. I move part 2 then.